The Lord then said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 2 of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, and also seven of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made." And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the floodwaters came on the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. Pairs of clean and unclean animals, of birds and all of the creatures that move along the ground, male and female, came to Noah and entered the ark, as God had commanded Noah. And after the 7 days, the floodwaters came on the earth.
All right, Hutch, thanks, man. That was pretty awesome because I got to see behind where Hutch was reading, and he literally was like this. So, Hutch, either you're going to have a growth spurt between now and the next time you read, or we'll get you a box, okay? Whichever we need to do. That was well done, though. All right, we are talking about change, and this story is kind of the foundation for what we're talking about with change. And I got kind of a chuckle. Somebody from this church, after I started the series last week, sent me a meme. And it basically was talking about the changes that he had experienced between 1978 and 2023. So if you can't read it, I'll just do a few of them. 1978, there was long hair, and in 23, longing for hair. 8 tracks in 78, and 23, cataract. I thought this was kind of funny. 78, KEGs. Kegs, and now it's EKGs. I'm going to skip the next one because that's just nasty. My favorite one is in 78, it was Staying Alive, the song. 2023, Staying Alive, the goal. Yeah, pretty funny stuff. Change comes to us and we experience disruption in its wake. It's a pretty common experience, but one kind of change I wanted to focus in on is when one big thing comes into our lives all of a sudden and everything changes because of just one new factor in our lives. I mean, one that I thought of right off the bat was losing a job, for instance. That can be a big change that you have to deal with, particularly if you weren't planning on it. What are some others? This is audience participation time. What are some examples of one big change that can happen in just normal everyday life? Having a baby. Yes, yes, yes. Speak out loud so I can hear you. Having to move. Yeah. Empty nest, sick child, getting sick yourself, death of a spouse, for sure, beginnings of new relationships, getting married, right? What else? Go ahead. That's what you said? Oh, I'm sorry, I told it from you. Going to college. Yeah, man, these things happen in our lives. For instance, how many of you have gotten one of these in the mail? Right? The funny thing is, you know it's coming, right? You know you're going to get one. You just don't know when, and whenever it comes, you are not at all prepared for it, but you have to deal with it. You don't have an option. It brings disruption into your life. So, let's talk about this. What do we, as those of us here who are Christian, what do we as followers of Christ have in our toolkit because of our faith to deal with the disruption that comes with change? Does the Bible have any wisdom at all to give to us about how to deal with change. It's a universal human condition. So how does our faith inform that? Well, as it turns out, I think a very prominent story in the Old Testament in the book of Genesis has a lot of help to give us, a lot of wisdom to give us about how to go through change. And that's a story of Noah and the ark and the flood. An amazing story, but a story of disruption, right? So we are taking a look at that story bit by bit. And we are in chapter 7 right now. So if you follow along in your Bible, chapter 7, or in your electronic Bible, we'll also, this is the words that Hutch read for you. And we see right away in verse 1 that Noah is attached, he's connected to this thing which is called an ark. So what is an ark? Well, we've already learned what an ark is in the previous chapter. We looked at this last week. So next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, I forgot. No. Is this right? Yeah. So this is how you are to build it. He said the ark is to be 300 cubits long, 15 cubits wide, 30 cubits high. Make a roof for it. So basically, what God is telling Noah is to build a box. Essentially, something that will float, that's big enough to carry him and his family and a pair of every animal on the earth. The question is, it has to stay on top of the floodwaters. That's all it has to do. So what does this thing look like? Well, my Bible, I don't know about yours, doesn't have pictures in it. So we go to a Bible that does have pictures in it, the Children's Bible, and this is how it pictures the ark. Now, to me, as I'm looking at the scale of that looks pretty much like my house on a boat. And that's not small. I'm not saying that's small, but it doesn't look really capable of handling that many. And it doesn't even look like you could have your whole family on that thing. Maybe a few small animals will work. So I'm guessing that this is not actually accurate. It needs to be a little bit bigger. So now we're back where we started from. How can we know? Is there anything where we can see how big this ark needed to be? Well, turns out all you have to do is drive north a little bit to Williamstown, Kentucky, to the Ark Experience. I'm seeing nodding heads. You've heard about this thing, the Ark Experience. Somebody actually built an ark, and they tried to be as faithful to their best guess of the dimensions that are presented in Genesis chapter 6. And this is what they came up with. This was opened in 2018 at a cost of $150 million. Yeah. So, and you can go inside and it gives you kind of, they have crowd control, which probably was not in the ark itself, but it gives you kind of a sense of how big this thing was. It's, by their estimate, it's 1.5 football fields in length. It is as tall as a 4-story building, and its cargo hold can hold up to 450 tractor trailers. So pretty darn big. The estimate of board feet of lumber that was needed to build this thing, 3.1 million board feet. So if you laid all those boards end to end, it would stretch from Winter Garden all the way to Nashville, Tennessee. Yeah. So it's pretty big. And the question is, how long did it take to build this thing? Well, the Ark Experience, that took 3 years, but that was with a well-paid, motivated workforce and modern equipment, as you can see, that Noah would not have had. So they estimate, taking into account Noah's age, the amount of help that he had. I mean, let's face it, you're not going to really be able to hire much of a workforce to build an ark that people can't go in themselves. They're going to say, okay, well, where's my room? And Noah's going to say, this is awkward, but, I mean, you're not going to find anybody that wants to work on this thing. So it really was down to him and his family. And so the estimate is it took him 70 years. That's a lifetime. For most of us, you devoted your entire life to this one thing, and one thing only. So Noah's in a position where his life suddenly changes with God's instruction, his command, Noah, build an ark. Now he's got to figure out where to park an ark and how to finish it. But then when he's finished, he's not done, is he? That's only part of the work. Now he has to fill the thing with a pair of every animal, clean and unclean from across the earth. But did you notice in chapter 7, Noah gets thrown a curveball? Because not only is it one pair of the clean and unclean animals, but there's some animals, some birds, that he's got to get 7 pairs of, presumably so that they can continue their sacrifices on the ark. So he has to now find 7 pairs of those things. So the estimate is that there were 6,700 individual animals that were on the ark. So by comparison, the Columbus Zoo, one of the biggest zoos in the world, has 5,000 animals, but those animals are spread out over 8 acres total. These are animals that are all confined in this one space. A big space, but I bet it got crowded pretty quickly. So I don't know where you stand on the ark or the ark experience in Kentucky, the historicity of all of this. If it's just a legend or a metaphor, different people have different ways of viewing the Noah story. But one thing we can agree on for sure is that the character Noah in this story had to deal with one big, hairy, literally change in his life that brought tons of disruption. It disrupted everything in his life. So what wisdom is there in this story that we can draw from when we face big changes in our life? Well, the answer is very straightforward. It's not hard to see the answer in this story. The problem is, it's not an answer that we really wanted to see. So it says that Noah just did everything the Lord commanded him to do. He was obedient. And obedience is our response when we encounter change and disruption. Obedience is our response. We see him doing it in Genesis chapter 7, verse 5, our verse for today that Hutch read for you. But it's not the first time he was obedient. It says in Genesis 6:22, Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. It wasn't the last time he was obedient. Later on in Genesis 7, male and female, every living thing, as God had commanded Noah, so Noah did. Noah was obedient. That was his response to everything that was thrown at him, this huge, big, hairy project that he had to reorient his whole life in order to do. His response was obedience. He adopted, in other words, a lifestyle of trusting a trustworthy God. He basically had a mindset that if God told him to do it, it was true and it was the right thing to do. And his motivation was that he believed that God was faithful and God loved him. And so whatever he did, even if it was a big disruption, he did it because he knew that God would bring something better out of it. God was going to bring redemption. God was going to bring renewal. And that's exactly what God planned to do. So all Noah had to do, all these questions that we all have about Noah the ark, what Noah did was he just said, okay, God, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I'm going to be obedient. Let's see. Does the Bible have anything to say about obedience? Is this a theme in the Bible? This is just a sampling of verses. But I picked these out especially because the obedience comes with a promise in each of these. See if you can see it. So this is from Joshua, one of my favorite verses. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then, look at this, you will make your way prosperous and you will have good success. Anybody gunning for prosperity and good success in their life? Well, we just were given the roadmap for it. We skip ahead to the New Testament. This is Jesus. Jesus answered him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him. Look what happens. And we will come to him, and we will make our home with him. The blessing of God will be a part of our life each and every day. God will bring it near. This is in 1 John, later in the New Testament, in the epistles. For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments. And look at what it says next. And his commandments are not burdensome. They may feel burdensome. But in the great comparison of all things that God is doing, they are not. And God will bring blessing to us. You see, in the Bible, obedience is a dividing line, especially in the Old Testament. Obedience is a dividing line between life and death. Obedience is a dividing line between experiencing the blessing of God and experience the curse of rejecting and rebelling against God. It's obedience that forms this critical juncture that we reach in our lives when we're asking ourselves the question, what am I going to do? Especially in those moments of high stress when everything's up in the air and change and upheaval and disruption. What am I going to do? Jesus himself in John chapter 3, verse 3 says that all of the blessings of the cross, redemption, forgiveness, newness of life, they come at a cost. They come with the expectation that because of that faith, your life will be changed. You will be, in his words, born anew. You will become a new creation. The old is gone. The new has come. And that new life is characterized by radical, faithful, joyful obedience to what God's calling you to do. As you discern it, what God is calling you to do. That's what a rich life looks like. That's what a conquering life looks like that isn't beaten up by big, hairy changes. Like going to college, or switching jobs, or starting a relationship, or ending a relationship, or having that diagnosis, coming away from the doctor and life has changed. We are overcomers because of the faithfulness of God in response to our faithfulness. So, practically, how do you apply this in your life? You're saying, Craig, that's good, very interesting, Bible story, thank you. But what do? Well, here's the thing. I usually try to give you some practical stuff, but I'm not going to do that today because only you can decide what obedience looks like for you. I can know what obedience looks like for me, but I can't know that for you. You need to ask God. And believe me, God will tell you what obedience looks like. Somehow, some way, God will reveal that to you, and then your task is to follow the word. Follow in the direction that God is pointing you in. I can tell you one thing, though. I can tell you what obedience is not. Obedience is not getting it right 100% of the time. Obedience is not getting it right 100% of the time. This is one of those things that for a fact, I'm going to repeat a third time. Obedience is not getting it right, what? 100% of the time. In other words, obedience does not equal perfection. That is not the expectation. That shouldn't be your expectation. Because frankly, the best way to learn obedience is through trial and error. And we can't have the trial without the error. We can't learn unless we make mistakes. Obedience is a growing, more mature in faithfulness. It is a commitment that we wake up with every day, knowing at the end of the day, we may not have hit that mark perfectly, but boy, did we make it a priority. And that's what makes the difference. And so, gracious God, I pray that you would come to us and you would let this word that you have given us solidify in our hearts. Turn it into concrete so that it stays with us. Make it a part of who we are. We confess, Lord, to you that obedience has not been our highest priority. At least obedience to you. Instead, we have chosen obedience to other things. But they do not come with the promise that you give. That if we're obedient to you, you will bring blessing. You will bring a better day. You will bring redemption and newness of life. And so, Lord, help us to be born again, to be made new, so that we can have a lifestyle of hearing your word and following it. I pray in Jesus' name.